One of the huge shifts in Common Core is really reflected in this slide. It's a reframing of the focus, not so much on what we as teachers are teaching, but what students are learning, what do they know, what can they do? That's what employers tell us. What can the students do when they come to us? Now please note some of the 21st century skills, as they're called, up here on this slide. This list of 21st century skills originated with the career and technical education folks, who are very much performance-based. You know, you've got to be able to do something. You've got to be able to perform, not just rote memory be expressed on a piece of paper. You've really got to be able to do this. And so if you look at the skills, it really goes along, I think, with what I mentioned to you earlier about we don't know what the future's going to hold. We may have a piece of machinery, for instance, right now that we teach a student to run. Well, in 5 years, that machinery may look very different. In 10 years, it may be gone. It may be obsolete and replaced with something else. And so that retooling is going to be important, which factors into number 9 up there. Being willing to be engaged in lifelong learning. I learn something every day, usually a bunch of somethings. That constant learning and growing and improving is really part of the human being's involvement as a better human being from day 1 to day 2. It's why we belong to civics groups, it's why we go to school, it's why we attend classes, whether they're for credit or not, it's why we go to church to study and learn. So that evolving of the human understanding is really important. When you look at the other task of the skills noted up there, I want you to think about what you did today. What did you do today? And are any of the things you did today reflected up there? Did you have to do any of that in your day-to-day? Yeah, probably, right? There was something up there. I have to do every bit of that virtually every day. It really defines my job. And that's one of the reasons I like this so much, because it really is reflective of the world of work. It's what we expect adults to be able to do in the work field, and as citizens, because that's part of why we have school, is to prepare citizens to be able to participate as a good citizen in our state and across our nation. So again, these are important things that are highlights included within these standards. This is a map that shows you the original 44 states plus D.C. that initially adopted the Common Core in 2010. You will note that there's a little subscript on the very bottom on the right that says that Montana and North Dakota subsequently adopted the Common Core state standards. So now there are 46 plus D.C. that have adopted the standards. Texas, which is the big state there, that did not adopt, and Virginia, which is up on your right, smaller state that did not adopt. I had the opportunity to speak to both of their State Department of Education folks, including state superintendents, back in 2010 when all the adoption was taking place. And I knew where they were heading, that they weren't going to adopt, and I wanted to know why. What was their thinking as we thought about what should happen in our state? And what they both said to me is we've just spent a great deal of money, time, energy, effort, and political capital getting our standards more rigorous. We've already done the work. So we think our standards are as rigorous, if not more so, than what we see in the Common Core. Virginia has had standards of learning that get ramped up about every 3 to 4 years for a very, very long time. And so SOLs, as they call them, was a term that all of the folks in Virginia were familiar with. So they were partnering and patterning their work around where they saw us going as a country. So they didn't say the old standards we have are okay. They said we've already done the work. I've not personally spoken to Alaska or Nebraska to know what their thinking is, but I suspect that they're probably about the same place, if they'd already either started work or completed their work. Now, there's been some information in the press that says that the Common Core state standards are mandated by the federal government. I want you to know that that's not true. If it were true, that entire map would be blue. It would all be blue. We wouldn't even be having this discussion. Now, what the feds do require is that you have rigorous college and career readiness standards, but not Common Core. It can't be Common Core. Common Core is not required. So one more time, if it were required, every state up there takes federal dollars, every state up there would be blue. And they would have been blue from the beginning. It would just been, okay, we're all blue, we're all going to adopt. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. So, how did we get these standards? Where did they come from? Here's the timeline. That is the real timeline, the truthful timeline. So I want to make sure that you have it. And Dr. Richard Boyd, by the way, who was the very first appointed state superintendent, told me after he listened to the presentation and participated in it in Oxford last week, he came up afterwards, he said, oh man, that conversation started way before 2007. Way before 2007. So it goes back to what I said about being able to collaborate and why we reinvented the wheel. So in 2007, the state education chiefs, that's people like me all over the country, got together in their organizational meetings, CCSSO. And I've been to several meetings and all the chiefs are there at almost every meeting. I can't be at all of them because they typically, lately have had them on board meeting days, so I can't miss our board meeting. But CCSSO, the Chief State School Officers Organization, is where that first idea, why can't we all be on the same page, was germinated. Now they call all of us chiefs because in some states they're secretaries of education. In other states they're commissioners of education. And in others like ours, they're state superintendents. So that's why the word chief was originated. From that conversation in 2008, the governors of all the states decided that it was a good idea to think about all of our states working together to come up with a common set of standards to ensure that we were all on the same page. NGA is the National Governors Association. So there's the two organizations that represent the states' efforts to pull ourselves together, again, for the benefit not only of our individual states, but of our country. The governors were very wise indeed. They punted the notion back to the state chiefs and said, we charge you with going forward and working on coming up with a common core of standards. Now, I don't know exactly why they chose the term common core, but I will tell you that over the weekend I saw something I'd never seen before. I just Googled common core, and lo and behold, the University of Hong Kong popped up, looking for someone to be their coordinator of Common Core. And I thought, what is that all about? So when I looked on their website, what I saw was, in little caps, not in caps, in little letters, it said, we're looking for someone to help coordinate the Common Core of expectations for our students. So that's sort of a nomenclature that's known around the globe as looking for some standards that are agreed upon. So that's the notion of Common Core. Someone said, I don't want to be common. Well, it didn't come from that definition of common. It came from a set of standards that are consistent. And it's not anything to be associated with common. There used to be something in the Jackson Public Schools, a set of standards long ago when I was a very young administrator, called CBOC. And it stood for the Common Body of Knowledge. And so it was an attempt, again, to have a standardization of the expectations across that district, regardless of where the students lived. Whether they were in a school that was in a wealthy section of town or a school that was in a poverty-ridden section of town. It was a standardization so that everybody knew what the expectations were. So that's where that came from. The ed chiefs and governors launched the notion of the development of these standards in 2009. Then from 2009 to 2010, the work was done around developing the standards. Now again, the governors didn't develop the standards. The chiefs didn't develop the standards. They monitored the work, they coordinated the work, they made sure the work was taking place. But it was really done by a series of individuals and groups working together, looking at standards from the most successful systems around the globe, as well as states that were at the top of the pack, and seeing what they looked like. And so they brought in the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, the National Council of Teachers of English, the International Reading Association, the NEA, our MAE representation, AFT, ACT, the College Board that does SAT, and other similar groups. PTA has had a lot to do with these standards and then the work around developing materials for parents. And so it wasn't just one person sitting in a dark room saying, here are the standards and this is what we want you to do. There were writers who helped take all of the information that was gleaned from those many meetings and put those standards together, and then they'd fight about them. I've been in a series of meetings with English faculty since I'm an English major where we try to agree on things. It's not always pleasant. There's a lot of fussing and fighting, and we all have things we believe strongly in. So there had to be some degree of compromise, but definitely consensus around what made sense. So that's the work that happened from 09 to 10. In March of 2010 is when the first draft of the standards went out for public comment. And they went out to as many groups, as many organizations, all the states, because they were trying to glean as many comments as they could possibly glean. Over 10,000 came in. Now, I can't tell you what they all were. I've had Mississippians tell me they sent in their comments, but they didn't come to me, so I can't give you a set of the comments. But what I can tell you is that from our staff that looked at the difference in the first round in March and the final standards in June, they saw some changes. Well, the changes tell us that those comments were substantive and those comments were used to make this revision. But I will tell you this, the standards aren't perfect. There's no such thing. No such thing. And the standards are standards, they're words on a piece of paper. The standards won't make a difference. What we've got to have make a difference is what happens in the classroom. And the teachers and other administrators, other educators in the room know that. The standards set the bar for us, but we still have to make our instruction work towards meeting those standards. So what did we do in Mississippi? In March, when that first rough draft, the first draft of the standards came out, there was a rather simple alignment study just to see, okay, what are we looking like? How do our standards stack up against what we're seeing as the proposed Common Core state standards? That alignment study was done with CEDL. It's one of our regional labs. Several regions in the country have these regional labs. They're researchers. They're based right now in Louisiana, but they also have Mississippians, retired Mississippian educators, who work with them. So they did that first, rather informal alignment study just to see how it stacked up without a lot of formal writing about the standards because we knew that they were just the first round of the draft. In June, it's CEDL. It's SEDL. I don't think it really stands for anything anymore. You know, it's Southeast Development and Laboratory. But it's SEDL, capital SEDL. If you want to Google it, you can just put S. Not the first time. Not the first time. The first alignment study they did was on the draft. They did a second alignment study and spent a good deal of time on it because it was an informal study. Maybe study is the wrong word. Let's just say they laid the standards out to give us a sense of what it was looking like. No, not for the initial. Not for the initial. But we do have all the remarks from the second version. State board approval. We took it to the state board in June to begin our public comment process. It's called APA, the Administrative Procedures Act. It's required by law. Law says you have to leave it out for 25 days. We left it longer. We left it out until August where final approval was given to the state board. From June to October is when that formal and very deep alignment study took place with Siegel as well as some consultants. When we had Siegel and we wanted them to do the work, we also wanted to have another set of eyes look at those standards. The hardest part about doing this alignment study is you can't really put standard number 1 from our standards and standard number 1 from Common Core and match them up. They don't match that way. And I see the educators in the audience going, no, they don't. They don't match that way. And so it's a very complicated process. If you're going to do it thoroughly, it takes a good bit of time. What I can tell you about the alignment study in general is that we found that in English language arts, we were pretty close. Our English language arts framework's pretty rigorous. Not quite where we want it to be, but not bad. The biggest difference, and you'll see that in a few moments when we get to some examples of what students have to do, the biggest difference is in the performance. When we assess what you know and are able to do, don't forget that part, that becomes a different kind of activity than what we've typically done to assess our students' ability to handle language through their reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Math was a different story. Our math standards were about a year behind. We, in other words, might be teaching something to students in 4th grade that the Common Core would have in 3rd grade. And so we've got to really do some ramping up in mathematics. And again, teachers, curriculum coordinators, superintendents, principals have already been working on this. This is not something that they're waiting to do. They've already been working to make it more rigorous. Again, I'd just like to remind you that this work started in 2010. It didn't just start. In fact, I looked to see when our first webinar was. That was the webinar about what this would look like for our schools. It was in early November of 2010. So this, again, didn't just happen yesterday. The process we follow is exactly the same process we follow every time we have a ramping up in rigor of our standards. It's exactly what we did from MCT 1 to MCT 2 and SAT 1 to SAT 2. So no difference. The biggest difference from what educators have said to me is that we've offered more training opportunities, and there's been a bigger window in terms of time to be ready to implement. Because it does require a lot of work on the part of the educators who are implementing these things. The alignment study, we'll make sure you get it. Is it on our website? No, it's up on our website. Public comments that we received when we sent out during that ABA process in 2010. There's several here. You're going to see that they're positive. Most of the comments we got were from teachers. We got a few from parents, we got a few from administrators, but most came from teachers in the classroom. And they were overwhelmingly positive. The teachers have not shied away from more rigorous standards. They have concerns, however, and let's go on. Here are the concerns that we saw from the public comments. There'd be teachers who would say to us, we love it, we need more rigor, we want to see everybody held to the same standard. I want to know how my kids are doing as compared to those in Connecticut. But here are the things I'm worried about. I'm worried about time for training and time for instruction, because you're talking about project-based learning, you're talking about problem solving, you're talking about things that require depth, and those depth activities require more time. They told us that they felt like some of the standards were vague in ELA, English Language Arts, and I would concur, some of them are difficult to sort of digest. I think we're in a different place now from 2013 than we were in 2010. They were concerned about the implementation timeline. How fast do we have to do that? Again, one of the reasons we began all this in 2010 was to make sure there was adequate time. Instead of waiting to 14, 15 and saying, okay, guess what, we're about to implement new standards. And then the ongoing concern that every educator has, every parent has, community has, is around what are we going to do for students who struggle? How are we going to help the students who struggle? What are the strategies for helping those students? And that's going to be an ongoing concern every year among those who care about students and their education. This is just a partial list of folks that have endorsed Common Core, and it's up here to let you know, again, this isn't something that is just flown in under the radar in Mississippi. It is across our country. We have a great deal of support for Common Core nationally and also within our state. A range of folks, from military folks to AFT, to NEA, to the ACT, College Board, and others that you see that have been mentioned here. We have elected officials and former elected officials who have said this is what our country needs. We need to do this. And again, we've got to remember it's not just Mississippi, even though that's what we're most concerned about. It's thinking about the future of our nation and how strong we really want it to be. So what's changing in English language arts and math? We need about 12 hours to really look at that. We want to give you some examples of things that are changing. And the other thing I would say to you is make sure you talk to the teachers and the principals in your local schools and your local school districts. And they can help you know about this in much greater depth than I'll ever be able to do. So here's an example. This is third grade mathematics. On the left-hand side, what you see is an example from our framework, our MCT2 framework that lists one of the third grade standards and then the Common Core standards on the other side, and they're about fractions. And I had a legislator in one of our meetings say, when you said fractions, it made me get high. So I'm an English major, and I don't know where the math people are out there, but I know you're there. And just thinking about fractions makes me break out in hives too, I have to say. But what we're asking the students to do over on the left-hand side is to identify and model representations of fractions. And so you're going to recognize halves, and you're going to be able to show me something, put something together to show me what halves look like in thirds and eighths and so on. On the other side, the Common Core state standards, again, third grade. Understand a fraction 1b as the quantity formed by one part when a whole is partitioned to b equal parts. That just gives me a headache reading it. But basically what it's telling us is that you need to be able to understand that 1/6 is the quantity formed by one part, the 1/6, when a whole is partitioned into 6 equal parts. And so it's building the concept of a fraction. It's real easy to identify, but to really have the concept is another notion altogether. So that's what that particular, that particular item is trying to help us understand. Using a number line, understanding what a number line is and how to show fractions on the number line is the second part of this particular segment from Common Core. And then lastly, explain. Explain, that's really important. Explain equivalence of fractions and compare fractions by reasoning. And so reasoning is one of those problem-solving skills that is transferable across life. That's part of what we need to see happening as we move into the adult world, the world of work, the world of existence as a citizen. That explain part is not something you often see in mathematics. And so you're going to have to explain, usually in writing, or if you're in the classroom during an instructional episode, you're going to have to explain what your thinking was verbally so you can share that with the class. And so not just being able to do a computation, but to really understand deeply what it means and how to transfer that information to similar problems as you come across them. If you can explain what you did, your chances of being able to do that transfer is much more likely to occur across time. And again, that's what we're trying to do. We shouldn't just be preparing students for one test. We've got to prepare them really for what that whole assessment looks like as you move across the spectrum of their entire educational career and on into the world of work. Again, what do they know and what can they do that becomes part of the reality for their adult world? Here are some other standards with just some simple examples. My favorite is 11th grade. Analyzing real-world situations using mathematics to understand the situation better and optimize, troubleshoot, or make an informed decision. with an example such as the first one, estimating water and food needs in a disaster area. We're right here on Katrina's anniversary. Would that be important if you have a hurricane? Yeah, if you need 40,000 cases of water and I show up with 40, that's not going to be a good thing. And you know that better than anyone. So being able to really do that application of what you're learning, again, transfers into the world of work. Can you really apply what you've learned in the classroom? Pop quiz time, okay? No grades will be given. We're not going to take them up. We're not going to put anybody on the spot. You've got a simple item. I want you to review the item and determine what you think the answer choice is. Okay, next slide. This comes from 3rd grade math, our MCT2 assessment. This is one of our practice items. Which of the following does not represent 2/5? Which of the following does not represent 2/5? Yes, Brenda, young lady, what did you say? Okay, she says B, is she right? Yeah, round of applause. Thank you.
Not if you can explain it.
Yeah. So how do we figure that problem's answer out? What do you have to do?
Waste my time.
You get an A plus. So really, you had to be able to count, right? Yeah, from 1 to 5. So can kindergarten children often do that? Yeah. Now this brilliant young lady did it like that. You're extremely smart, I can tell. And she explained, there's that explanation. She explained how she got her answer, what her thinking was. And that's great. That's what we need to continue to do. But I wouldn't say this was particularly complex, right? So go to the next one. So count to 1 to 5, you have to come up with the answer. No real understanding of a fraction unless you had a brilliant young lady who just did that explanation part. Then you could find out if they understood the concept of the fraction. It doesn't allow students to really show what they do know in terms of what fractions are. On the new assessments, you will not see those underlined clue words. Okay? What was underlined? Not. That gives you a clue. I don't know about you, but I don't get any clues when I'm at work. Nobody says a good thing about this, that might be the right answer. They don't do that. Anybody in the room heard of Ron Clark? Yep. So most of the educators have. He's a brilliant educator. He's been recognized as a phenomenal teacher by Disney and other national groups. The energy would just make you all tired. Every time I see him, I get exhausted just watching. He started an inner city school in Atlanta and is getting phenomenal results. I heard him speak at an open convocation at a school district that was so kind of inviting me to hear him. And you know what he said was, American students are not working hard enough. Not working hard enough. Especially the really bright ones. They get easy A's. They like it. They don't want more homework. They don't want to be challenged. That not, to me, is an example of how we've really done a lot of spoon feeding, and we just got to stop it, because that's not happening in other countries. Some of you know that my son and daughter-in-law and 3 beautiful granddaughters live in Singapore. What I see there is a different mindset around study and working hard and not being satisfied with an easy day. And they're killing us. And they are killing us on any measure. In 1965, Singapore was a backwater, known for pirating, thievery, fighting among different groups. It was just a mess. It was a mess. They decided it wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough. And so now they're leading, especially in math and science. But that whole mindset of, no, you have to work harder is one that we've got to help our students adopt, and we as parents have to deal with it too. I know how hard it was with my younger child who never wanted to do his homework. I know how to have one like that. It was a battle every single night, and he would wear me down some nights. But most of the time, I just had to put my fingers in my ears and say, you have to do this again, because this work is awful. It's good enough, Mama. It's good enough. No, it's not good enough. And so that's really, I think, what we've got to say to our students. You're capable of more. So we want you to put it out. Do it more. The senior year, what happens senior year? I had students look me in the eyeballs and say, I'm going to coast this year. Anybody heard that besides me? Yeah, I'm going to coast this year. You know, I've been working hard for 11 years, and I got all A's, and, let me just take 2 courses, and I'll go work or go home or whatever. Not what other countries are doing. Senior year, ramp it up. You're getting college credit, you're in AP classes, you're in IB classes, you're pushing it. Because they know it's their last chance before they get out there and deal either with the post-secondary environment or work. And so we've got to change all of that because our students deserve it, and they're as capable as any other kids on this planet. We just have to help them see those possibilities, get the vision for what they can do with their lives and what we can look like as a state.